Hi, I'm Sarah with Missouri Star, and in this episode, we are going to be making this adorable Christmas tree garland that is perfect for holiday decorating. So you're going to want to join me to see just how we make it. So what do we need to make this adorable Christmas tree garland? Now, the one that's hanging behind me is in pretty traditional Christmas tree colors. So nice little green trees, little brown stumps, nice brown for the whole garland holding it all together. But you can also get really creative with colors. So I've got just a fun assembly of colors here that I'll use to show you how we put it all together at the end. But don't be limited to being really literal with your Christmas trees. You can really have fun and make this garland work with whatever your decor is. If you have like a fancy white Christmas tree with all blue lights, you could do fancy little white Christmas trees. You can do some embroidery on them. You can have all kinds of fun with this project. So we are working with Cascade Yarns Cantata, which is, I think it's my favorite yarn of the season. I've been using this in a whole lot of projects. It's a fun construction yarn. So it's a tube. It's like a net tube made out of cotton thread that's undyed. And then superwash merino fibers are blown at it with a big fan while the net is being constructed. So those wool fibers get caught between the little cotton threads. So it's a very lightweight and lofty, like there's a lot of air in it. Worsted weight yarn. So it's not dense, it's not heavy, it's nice and light. But it's a standard worsted weight. That's a number 4 medium yarn. And you get a great color effect because the cotton is undyed, but the wool is dyed. So it sort of gets a little bit darker around the edges where the stitches are kind of dense, but you get this really great depth of color. And there's, I think, over 30 different colors of cantata. So there's this great Christmas green that we've used for the Christmas trees behind me. And then we're using the cocoa color for the trunks of the trees. But there are a couple of browns, there are a couple of greens, and there's lots of other colors in between. So feel free to pick up the yarn that works best for your holiday decorating color scheme. What else are we going to need for this project? It's worked on a US size 7 needle. Now you could use double pointed needles. I've got a little 24-inch circular needle here, whatever works for you. You could do this on single pointed needles if you have those. So it's whatever needle size and style works for you. You just want a US size 7. That's a 4.5 millimeter needle for this project. You'll need a tapestry needle. I like the bent tip chibi needles from Clover that come in this fantastic little case, and a pair of scissors. And these are my Clover patchwork scissors. So I love those. And that's it. So let's hop into the project. So you don't need to have 2 colors, but they look a little bit more like trees if you do use 2 colors. So I'm going to start with the cocoa color here, and we're going to cast on 8 stitches. So I'm just going to cast on 8 stitches using a long tail cast on method. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then I'm going to knit 6 rows. So this is in garter stitch because I'm knitting every row. So it gives us some nice texture in the trunk of the tree, and it goes pretty quick. So go ahead and cast on those 8 stitches and then knit those 6 rows, and then meet me back here for the next step. All right, once you've got those 6 rows done, you can go ahead and cut that yarn because we're not going to use it again. And I'm just going to set it aside. So this could be a really good project if you've got scrap yarns that you want to use up. And then I'm feeling kind of sassy and in an 80s kind of mood, so I'm going to use this great mint green color. And what I'm going to do is cast on 6 stitches. So I'm actually going to use the other end of the needle. I'm going to cast on 6 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I'm going to knit my way across these 8 stitches. Nope. I'm going to purl my way across these 8 stitches. Sorry about that. So you've cast on 6 stitches, and then you're going to purl your way across the 8 stitches from your little tree trunk. because we want a total of 20 stitches wide at the base of this tree. So now I need to cast on another 6 stitches, but I can't long tail cast on because I've been knitting. So what do? We're going to do what's called a cable cast on. So we're going to turn the work over as if we're going to knit back across. And we're going to knit that first stitch, bring through the loop, but instead of dropping this stitch off the left needle, we're going to take the loop that we just made on our right needle and put it back onto our left needle. And then we're still in that loop. We're going to knit again, but we take this new loop and we put it on the left hand. See that? And I put it on there. Now, if it gets a little loose, you can give it a tug. So you're just knitting a stitch, but instead of dropping everything off, you're just putting it back on your left hand needle. You're going to do that 6 times. I've got 1 more to go. And then you can stop and double check and make sure that you've got 20 stitches. 2, 4, 6, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. Oh, I've got 21, so we can take that last one off. And then I'm just going to count that again just to make sure. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. All right, so we've got 20 stitches. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to work in stockinette stitch. So I'm going to knit a row, purl a row, knit a row. That's this whole project. We're going to knit a row, purl a row, knit a row. So I'm going to knit this row, purl back, then I'm going to knit another row, and then I'm going to purl a row. So that's 4 rows that I'm going to work. And then we're going to do some decreases. So go ahead and work 4 rows in stockinette stitch and meet me back here for the decreases. So once you've worked those 4 rows, we're ready to do our first row of decreases. So the first one is we want the decreases to angle in as the sides of our tree angle in. So we're going to knit 2 together, but we're going to knit 2 together through the back loop. So we're going to go through the back loop of those 2 stitches and then knit those together, just like that. And then knit your way across until there are 2 stitches left on your needles. And then we'll do our second decrease, which is just a plain old knit 2 together. Easy peasy. Almost there. So those last 2 stitches, knit them together. You're going to purl your way back, then you're going to knit a row, and then purl another row. So this whole tree is worked in sections of 4 rows. So we're doing a decrease row, then a purl row, then a knit row, then a purl row, and then we're going to repeat those 4. So go ahead and work these 4 rows, and then you'll repeat these 4 rows, and then you'll repeat them, and you'll repeat them until you have 4 stitches. So go ahead and repeat those until you've got 4 stitches, and then meet me back here and I'll show you the next steps. So when you've got those 4 stitches, again, you're going to work those 4 rows. So your decrease that gets you to the 4 stitches, purl a row, knit a row, purl a row. Then we're going to take these 4 stitches and turn them into 2 stitches. So I'm knitting 2 through the back loop, and then knitting 2 together. And then I'm going to purl those 2 stitches, and I'm going to purl them loosely, which seems really funny, but purl them nice and loose. Because now we have to make the back side of our tree. Why am I making the back side of a tree? Like, you just made a tree, Sarah. Why are you gonna repeat the whole thing? So I'm gonna repeat the whole thing, but it splits here at the middle, at the top, and I'm gonna repeat the whole thing so that these little trees are the same on both sides. They're the same on both sides. And making it double layer, just, I don't know, it just gives it a little more something. And when you're knitting in stockinette, see how it wants to curl. It wants to curl this way, or it wants to curl that way. So if I were to just bind this off and hang it up, it's just going to turn into are those candles? What are those hanging there? They're not going to look like trees because they're going to want to curl up in any way that they can. So by making it double layered, there's just a little more weight to them. They're a little bit more substantial. And if you wanted to, you could put stuffing inside of them to really make them pop. I like them nice and flat, but I like them double-sided. So we've got to then repeat this whole tree shape in reverse, which means instead of doing decreases, we've got to do increases. So that's why you want to purl those 2 stitches nice and loose, because we're going to have to increase here. And to do that, we're going to be making stitches. We're going to be picking up stitches. So we're going to knit the first stitch. And then there's this bar between the stitches here. You see that? And what we're going to do is we're going to pick it up and we're going to put it on our left hand needle, just like that. And then I'm going to use my right hand needle to swing around inside that bar and just stretch it out a little bit, because I want to come into it this way as if to knit. And that's made 1 stitch. And now that bar is still there because we're going to pick it up again for another increase. But this time I'm going to pick it up from behind and put it on my left needle. And then I'm going to knit through the back of that loop for my second made stitch. And then I'm going to knit the last stitch. And then we go back into the same pattern. So now we're back into that 1 knit row where we do something funky, in this case increasing where we used to decrease, then purl a row, then knit a row, just like that, then purl 1 more row. It goes really fast when there's just a couple stitches. And then we're back to another increase row. And this increase row is what you'll be doing for the rest of this tree. So you knit 1 stitch, then that bar between, you pick 1 up. This is a left leaning decrease. Pick it up, put it on your left hand needle, swing your right hand needle through so that you can pull it and open it up on the front so that you can go into it as if to knit. And then knit until there's 1 stitch left. Then pick up that bar from behind, slip your left needle into the front, knit it through the back, knit the last stitch, then purl a row, knit a row, purl a row, and then repeat that increase row. And you're going to repeat those 4 rows until you've got 20 stitches back on your needles. And then you are going to purl a row, knit a row, purl a row, and then meet me back here when we put the whole thing together. So you've gotten back to 20 stitches, then you purled a row, you knit a row, you purled a row. So now we have, you can see the mirrored tree shape, because this is going to fold at that point, and that'll be our tree. So once you did that increase row that got you to 20 stitches, you knit a row, you did the row that got you to 20 stitches, you purled a row, you knit a row, you purled another row. Now we're going to bind off. So we knit 2 stitches and then pick the first one up and over the second one. Knit a stitch, up and over. And you're just going to do this all the way across. You want to make sure that you do this rather loosely. You don't want to be super loose, but you do not want to be tight. So be loose here. And be surprised how loose you can make that stitch and still make everything work. So you're going to bind your way off across this edge, 1 stitch at a time. And then when you've gotten to the end, you're going to cut a really long tail, because the tail is what we're going to use to sew this tree together. Just a few more stitches here. We're almost done. Binding off goes pretty quick. Not quite as fast for me as casting on, but fairly quickly. 2 more stitches and then we'll be good. There's our last stitch. And then I like a nice long strand for the seaming that we're going to do. So I'm going to pull that last stitch nice and big, drop my needle out, grab the tail, pull it all the way through, and then just tighten that stitch up. So there's your work bound off. Your needle goes away for now, and now you need a tapestry needle. And this is, again, this is a worsted weight or a number 4 medium yarn. So you want a tapestry needle that has a fairly wide eye. I like to fold the yarn over the eye, pinch it really tight, and then that little fold should thread through the eye of the needle fairly easily. All right. I'm going to take this tree, fold it in half, match up those bottom edges. I suppose you could pin it, but with the merino wool fibers in this yarn, it's slightly sticky, so it'll hold on to itself fairly well. And here's, this is a fun part for me because I don't mind seaming and weaving in edges. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to whip stitch this edge together. So I'm just matching a strand from each side and stitching them together. See that? One from each side and pull it through. You don't have to be super fancy and try to match the rows, especially if you're doing a solid colored tree, because these whip stitches, nobody's ever going to see them because it's the same color yarn. You could do stripes. You could do block sections as you make your trees. Knit a few rows in one color, knit a few rows in another color, knit a whole section in a third color, and then go back and forth. So you can really have fun with the color play in these trees. And of course, as you change colors that you're knitting with, you'll have the tails from where you join them. And then you'll just use those tails to seam those sections together so that they're seamed together in a color that matches. So that's it. You're just going to whip stitch your way all the way up to this point and then all the way down the other side. When you've got to the bottom of the other side and it's just the very bottom of your tree that's left open, meet me back here and I'll show you how to finish that off. So here you can see I've got both of those long sides of the tree seamed together and just the bottom is open. So I'm going to unthread my needle here and take the time to deal with the tails from my trunk. The tail from where I originally cast on for the tree, I'm just going to tuck it inside. It's not going to come undone. I'm just going to deal with these two tails from the tree trunk. So I'm going to thread that one and just going to give that stitch a little tug, and then I'm going to weave that end in through the stitches of my trunk here. Again, about an inch, inch and a half worth of the yarn woven in, and then that tail is done. I can snip it, and then I can go for this other tail and do the same thing. I do this mostly because then these tails are out of the way as I'm seaming up the bottom of the tree. You could certainly wait and weave these tails in when the tree is all seamed up. But getting these tails out of the way always feels like the right thing to do for my process. So there's that one out of the way. Snip, and then I can go back and rethread the yarn that I'm using to seam up the tree. So now I'm working along this bottom edge, and you can see there's this lovely row of stitches from where I bound off on this side, and on the other side are the stitches where I cast on. So what I'm going to do is grab that cast on edge from the back, and then I'm going to seam it to the bottom strand of this bind off edge. So there's 2 strands to each stitch. I'm going to go to that bottom strand like that. And again, this is just a whip stitch. So I'm grabbing that cast on edge, the bottom strand of the bind off, and working my way across those 6 stitches. That's 5. And the 6th one is right here next to the trunk. All right, then I'm at the trunk. What do I do with this? Well, if you look at the trunk, you can see this row of purl stitches in our tree color. So I'm going to catch each one of those and stitch it to the bottom strand of that bind off edge. Just like that. Those 8 stitches. Whoa. Come here, you. All the way across. And that bent tip of this needle comes in handy for catching those stitches. Almost to the other side. 2 more stitches here. And then on this side was where our long tail cast on was before we purled across those trunk stitches. So if I turn this over, this edge looks a little bit different. This edge here almost looks like what we were just stitching to on the inside of that trunk. So I like to grab those stitches there and stitch them to the other side. So it sort of rolls that edge under. These last few stitches are a little finicky, but that's okay. Just take your time. There's no time clock on getting this done. Work it at your own pace. Oh, one more. And there. The bottom of our tree is sewn up. And then what I'm going to do is just do a little, oh, that's really coiled up. I'm just going to do a little slip knot there. And then I'm going to run the needle back inside the tree, inside the stitches, and pop out somewhere in the middle. And get my yarn uncoiled from itself. So it doesn't knot itself up too bad. And then just pull it through. And then you can snip that off. And then tug your little tree into shape. Now you can block these. You don't really have to though. Being 2 layers, they sort of lay themselves nice and flat. Isn't that cute? Little Christmas tree shape. I love it. So then how do we turn this into a garland? You're going to start with whatever color you want the strand of your garland to be. And you're going to work an I-cord. I'm just going to grab these 2 double pointed needles. I-cords are easier to do on a double pointed needle. And this is a 3-stitch I-cord. So we're going to cast on 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3. And slide those back over to the tip of your left needle. And then just knit those stitches again. Your working yarn is going to come across the back of these stitches. Slide it to the end and then knit those stitches again. And it turns this into a tube. So I'm going to knit 1 more row and then I'll show you what happens. Let's see, there's 1, 2, 3. Now watch what happens when I pull on that tail. See? Turns it into a nice little tube. So you're just going to knit an I-cord. You're going to start by knitting 40 rows. So this is a lovely I-cord. You're going to knit 40 rows because the first 10 of that is going to become a loop that we hang this by. So you knit the first 40 and then you'll join your tree. So you're going to make 6 of these trees. So you can see on the lovely garland behind me, I'm just threading this I-cord back on. And this is how you attach your trees. So you've knit the number of rows indicated in your pattern. And then this is the row where you join your tree. So we're going to knit the first stitch. And then we're going to put our needle into the second stitch and sort of slide everything down into the middle of our needles. And then we're going to go to the top of the tree and we're going to go through a couple of stitches at the top of the tree like that. And then we're going to knit through those stitches. It is finicky and fiddly. Take your time with it. And then pull that loop through the loop on your left needle and then knit the last stitch. And that's it. That tree is joined there now. Now you're going to knit another 30 rows until you get to where you would join the next tree. Or if you are at the end and you have joined all 6 trees, you're going to knit 40. And then you're going to turn the extra 10 rows at the end into a hanging loop. So when you get to where you've knit your 40 rows at the end, just bind these 3 stitches off normally. And then let me show you how you turn the end into a hanging loop. So again, you'll need your tapestry needle. You'll thread that, and then you'll look at your I-cord and you'll count up 10 stitches. So if you follow a line of knit stitches, they look like V's. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. On that 10th one, I'm just poking my needle right through the middle of that I-cord and pulling it through. So now I have a little loop. Then I'm going to go up a stitch, poke my way back through to the end there. This is not fancy needlework, folks. This is pretty rudimentary stuff. You're just going to go back and forth through the body of your I-cord and through that cast on end a bunch of times until it feels pretty sturdily stitched together. And then I'm just going to make a little slip knot. Boink, boink. And then I'm going to thread the needle up inside the I-cord until it pops out at the top. And then snip that close, but don't cut your knitting. And then give it a tug so that end pops in. And that's it. That's your little hanging loop. And so when you've got all of that done, you'll have a lovely little tree garland. So that's it. That's our little Christmas tree garland. I hope that you've had fun on this project with me. I would love to see your projects, so make sure that you tag in Missouri Quilt Co. on your social media and show us your little projects. If you haven't yet, remember that you can click the link below or go to Missouri Quilt Co. to pick up all of the supplies that you need for this project or a kit in your favorite colors. I hope you have enjoyed stitching with me and making this fantastic little decorative garland. I will see you in our next episode, and until then, happy knitting! Thanks so much for stitching along with us on this Missouri Star yarn loving tutorial. If you haven't yet, you want to click that bell and subscribe and become part of the Missouri Star family and make sure that you never miss another tutorial. You never know, you might make your next favorite project.